You're listening to Live with Lou out here at the Patriot, high above Mount Huth, or high above the valley floor on Mount Huth. And Wikiman, Santos Vigil, and I are sitting here, and he claims that everything's working. The hamsters are spinning the cage. Live stream's working. He's showing me on his phone. And we're going to go. We're going to go for 3 hours out here. So wherever you're listening from, if you're over at the Yuba City Water Treatment Plant or the Juvenile Hall in Marysville, or you're out there in Idaho, or wherever you're checking in from, happy days. It's chilly up here because we don't use heat up here. We're trying to cut the cost. It's high. Did you know the PG&E, Pacific Gas and Electric, is very expensive? In fact, they say that it's 60% higher in California for utilities than it is in other states. So we're just kind of conserving. We do have the lights on, and everything else is working. Yeah, we're not busting. Are you busting out your candles over there in case we want to turn the lights down? He's like, the Wiki Man's got his hands up near the neon lights, seeing if he can get some heat off them out here. Like chilly. He didn't even... Maybe you're going to get a fresh cup of coffee. You can hold on to that. When we used to hunt ducks out here in north of Marysville, we used to have those hand warmers. You fill them with kerosene and light them, and put them in a little cloth bag. You remember that? I don't even know whether they do that anymore. That works. Maybe we should get those and just keep them out here at the desk. Well, anyway, we're here at 1410 a.m. and I think it's 94.3 FM, right? I always get the 3 and the 4 mixed up. But if you want to dial us up, you can do so at 530-742-5555. And so I mentioned the live stream, and I was talking, we had a trauma intervention meeting, and we meet out at the training center in Yuba City at the water treatment plant. And one of the guys said, hey, we always listen to the show as we're out there working on all the equipment. And we have our phones in our pockets. But he said, we have Wi-Fi problems out here. And I said, I think you can just go to your phone app. And I was trying to explain it to him. But anyway, welcome all you that are listening from through various ways. And if you need to take a break and come back later, you can catch us at One Eye Blind Media on YouTube. One Eye Blind Media is the name of the channel. And then just look for Live with Lou, pick your date, and you're good to go. Let's see. I think that's it. And so I want to tell you a little story here that happened. And in 1996, Coach Scolinos was at a big conference for college coaches. That year he was 78 years old, and he had retired 5 years previously from college. He coached from beginning in 1948. So they wanted him to speak to all these coaches, and he kind of shuffled at 78. He was a little slowed down, and he shuffled up to the stage with a big ovation because they knew him, had a lot of respect for him. He was wearing polyester pants, a light blue shirt, and a string around his neck from which a home plate hung. In other words, a baseball home plate, full size, white home plate hung around his neck. Everybody just thought this guy has lost his marbles. After speaking for 25 minutes, not once mentioning the prop hanging around his neck, Coach Scalino appeared to notice some people snickering out there in the audience, and even those who Scalinos had to wonder, even those who knew Scalinos had to wonder exactly where he was going to go with all this, or if he'd simply forgotten about home plate since he'd forgotten on stage. Then finally, he said, "You're probably all wondering why I'm wearing home plate around my neck." I laughed along with the other coaches, this guy said, acknowledging the possibility. So Scolino said, "I may be old, but I'm not crazy. The reason I stand before you today is to share with you, baseball people, what I've learned in my life, what I've learned about home plate in my 78 years." So several hands went up when Scalino asked how many Little League coaches were in the room. And he said, do you know how wide home plate is in Little League? After a pause, 17 inches, someone said. That's right. How about over in Babe Ruth's day? Any Babe Ruth coaches in the house? Somebody yelled out, 17 inches? That's right, Scalino said. Now, how about you high school coaches? Hundreds of hands went up. How wide is the home plate over there in high school, the baseball games? Said 17 inches. You're right, he said. And you college coaches, how about over there? What's the home plate like? They said 17 inches. How about minor leagues? How wide is the home plate over there in the pro ball? Said 17 inches. How about major leagues? Same over there? They said, yep, 17 inches. 17 inches, he yelled. And what do they do with a big league pitcher who can't throw the ball over 17 inches? Everybody kind of paused. Do they send him down to Pocatello, Idaho? He hollered. Well, they don't. What they don't do is this. They don't say, that's okay, Jimmy. If you can't hit a 17-inch target, we'll make it 18 inches or maybe increase it to 19. We'll make it 20 inches so you have a better chance of hitting it. If you can't hit that, let us know. We can make it even wider, maybe 25 inches. Coaches got pretty silent. So Scalino says, what do we do when your best player shows up late to practice, or when our team rules forbid facial hair, or a guy shows up unshaven? What if he gets caught drinking? Do we hold him accountable, or do we change the rules to fit him? Do we widen home plate? People started to kind of chuckle. There were 4,000 people out there in the audience. And he turned the plate around towards him, and he used a Sharpie, and he began to draw on it. When he turned it toward the crowd, pointed up, with the pointed part of the plate up, a house was revealed. In other words, he's created a house out of the home plate by having the square side on the bottom and the pointed side at the top. He added a couple windows and a door. He says, this is the problem in our homes today, with our marriages, with the way we parent our kids, with our discipline. We don't teach accountability to our kids, and there's no consequence for failing to meet standards. We just widen the plate. Then, to the point, at the top of the house, he added a small American flag. This is a problem in our schools today. The quality of our education has gone downhill fast, and teachers have been stripped of the tools they need to be successful and to educate and discipline young people. We are allowing others to widen home plate. Where is that getting us? 4,000 coaches sat in silence. He replaced the flag then with a cross on the top of the plate. And this is the problem in the church, where powerful people in positions of authority have taken advantage of young people, only to have such an atrocity swept under the rug for years. Our church leaders are widening home plate for themselves, and we let it go. And the same is true of the government. He said, our so-called representatives make rules for us that don't apply to themselves. They take bribes from lobbyists in foreign countries. They no longer serve us, and we allow them to widen home plate. We see our country falling into darkness while we just watch. This guy says, at a baseball convention where I expected to learn something about curveballs and bunting and how to run better practices and trainings, I had learned something far more valuable, the guy said, from an old man with a home plate hung around his neck. I learned something about life, about myself, about my own weaknesses, and about my responsibilities as a leader. I had to hold myself and others accountable to that which I knew to be right, lest our families, our faith, and our society continue down an undesirable path. If I'm lucky, Coach Scalino concluded, you will remember one thing from this old coach today. It is this: if we fail to hold ourselves to a higher standard, a standard of what we know to be right, if we fail to hold our spouses and our children to the same standards, if we are unwilling and unable to provide a consequence when they do not meet the standard, and if our schools and churches and our government fail to hold themselves accountable to those they serve, there is but one thing to look forward to. With that, he held home plate in front of his chest, turned it around, and revealed its dark black backside. He said, "We have dark days ahead." Coach Scalino died in 2009 at the age of 91. Well, I was just sitting in the other room waiting for Auditor Controller Nate Black to wrap things up, and I stumbled across a short video clip of one of the top principals, elementary school principals in the Yuba Sutter area. In fact, Wikiman next across the glass from me, his wife used to work for him, Doug Eshman. And if you've ever, there's a show on TV, I think it's about talent. You know, what is it, where people compete? And so every once in a while, if somebody is really spectacular, they hit this button and all this gold confetti comes out of the ceiling. Have you ever seen that? Yeah. And so it's like the spectacular performance, right? So Doug Eshman, there's this crazy film clip of him, and they were honoring these students that had excelled at Mary Kovalad School in Marysville. And he had this big bag full of confetti, and he was throwing it over the top of them. They didn't drop it from the ceiling. He just like sprayed them with it, and the kids thought it was the coolest thing. So I'm sure his family members will have that long after he's gone, him running up and down, spraying these kids with the confetti. But I was driving by the school the other day, and I noticed on their electronic sign above the school that they were recognized this past year as a California Distinguished School. That's amazing. Because I remember before Doug came to that school, and the school had nothing but excuses, which most schools have, because they have such lousy outcomes, although they collect, kids have to go there by law, and teachers get paid, and custodians get paid, and utilities get paid, but the outcomes are horrible. People can't even, a lot of them can't even end up reading and writing and doing math at competent levels. But Mary Kovalad School was a unique school, downtown Marysville, where there was a large transient population, not just homeless, but people would be there 1 year or 2 years and then gone. So kids, like when I went to school, most kids started in kindergarten and went right on through school together. But there's an instability in downtown Marysville. There didn't used to be, but the demographics have changed. And so they used to write articles in the Appeal Democrat about how they had to put a washer and dryer over there to clean kids' clothes, and they had to go get stuff to give kids, and they had to do this, and they had to do that. Therefore, these terrible homes, these poor homes full of drug addicts and troubled people and poor people, there's no way that these kids could be expected to perform, because you just felt sorry for them. However, when Doug took over and he began assembling, in spite of the union restrictions on teachers that you had to keep lemons in the classroom, Doug began to put together a World Series or pennant-winning group of teachers who didn't believe all the baloney and thought, hey, we got these kids from 6 to 8 hours a day. We can educate them. And so they began to win. I think they've won a number of California schools awards, which very few schools in the Yuba Sutter area ever win them. In fact, Doug Eshman was telling me a while back that they're one of the top schools in Northern California. And I thought, way to go, Doug Eshman. Every year I think, are you going to retire this year? And everybody's hoping he doesn't. So I was listening to somebody. I thought it was Robert Bendorf. I was watching a one of those dog and pony show pitches that the leaders of Yuba County made to pass a sales tax increase. And I think it was Robert Bendorf made a comment, maybe it wasn't, he's the county administrator, about how when he grew up here, there was just nothing to do. I thought, honestly, man, you're like clueless. There's like tons of stuff to do here. I never had a bored day in my life around here, whether it was floating down the river or going hunting or playing ball or going to the gym, or like there was more than enough to do. But there's a problem in the mindset, and I saw this article that I thought was great. It's called Words for Teenagers. It says Northland College principal John Tapping has offered the following words from a judge who regularly deals with young people. Quote, always we hear the cry from teenagers. What can we do? Where can we go? There's nothing to do. So the Northland College principal, John Tapping, says, my answer is this: go home, mow the lawn, wash the windows, learn to cook, build a raft, get a job, visit the sick, study your lessons, and after you finish, read a book. Your town does not owe you recreational facilities. Thank you, Jesus. I'm glad somebody just said that. Your town does not owe you recreational facilities. In other words, if a guy goes out and beats somebody with a bat, that's not the adult's fault for not having Gaucher Park swimming hole. Your town does not owe you recreational facilities, and your parents do not owe you fun. If I went and told my mother she owed me fun, she would have jack-slapped me across the kitchen. Holy smokes. The world does not owe you a living. You owe the world something. Get a clue. You know, that's the message. You go out and do something for somebody else. Why are you always focused on your little belly button down there? Navel gazing. He says you owe it. You owe the world your time, your energy, and your talent so that no one will be at war, in sickness, and lonely again. Sounds like somebody's been reading the Bible, but of course, oh yeah, well, we can't talk about that because like we're a secular society. In other words, he says, grow up. Stop being a crybaby. Get out of your dream world and develop a backbone. Start behaving like a responsible person. You are important and you are needed. It's too late to sit around and wait for somebody to do something someday. Someday is now, and that somebody is you. I like this. I'm telling you, up here in Northern California, there is tons of stuff to do. I remember some of my friends used to take their kids, drop them off at school, and then go up. Some of the women out there at the church, they would drop their kids off and be all ready and then run right up to Bear Valley and ski for a few hours and come back. Isn't that something? You can do that here in California. You can go down here, nice weather, zip up an hour and a half, go to Bear Valley, ski, come back, grab your kids, and carry on. Have a good day out. Kids can do the same thing. Half day, got some wheels, just boom, hour and a half, they're up skiing. You know something, people? I'm telling you, we are so screwed up. I like this. You know that passage in the Bible, Wikiman, talks about going back to the dust of the earth. I like this. You are dust, and you will return to dust. That's why I don't dust. It could be someone I know. I thought that's why I don't dust. Well, we're out here talking for food today, and we are supported by Elite Universal Security, and they're trying to fill in where the cops can't take care of us because they're out trying to like catch people, hitting people up, stealing from people. Somebody in my neighborhood where Monty Hecker and Elite Universal Security, they kind of protect some of the commercial enterprises around the area. In my neighborhood, in 1 week, there was a shooting in one direction 3 blocks away. In another direction 3 blocks away, 3 pit bulls attacked a kid, a 17-year-old kid, and tore him all up. And then after that, somebody stole a Hyundai car right off my block. I thought, you know something, we need some help. So I was noticing on Elite Universal Security's website at eliteuniversalsecurity.com, they're looking for help themselves. They said, we need some help. We need some workers. So if you're looking for a job and you'd like to get in the security business, maybe you're thinking about, maybe I'd like to go into law enforcement, but I can't start yet. But I'd like to start making some money. You can hook up with Elite Universal Security. They'll train you. If you think, I don't know anything about that, but I'd like to try it. They'll train you. You can call them at 530-749-0280, 749-0280. Just Google it, Elite Universal Security. They also have all kinds, as I mentioned, they train you. They got all kinds of cool courses on how to be, all the techniques and the skills to be a security guard. And they also have later this month, this weekend, in fact, which is probably too late to get involved right now, but they have this weekend and then January 26 and 27 concealed weapon training, you know, and also a range day. You can recertify or start, and they'll help you. But they have all kinds of classes you can take. Some are online. You can go on to api-academy.com, and you can see all the classes they have. Pretty cool. And so Monty Hecker, they're out trying to keep things under control in our community and complement what law enforcement's doing. Now I'm going to talk when we come back about what's going on in Starbucks, which should scare the hell out of everybody. But it's pretty gnarly, and there was an incident. There's incidences all the time in our Starbucks over here in Marysville. It's one of the nicest Starbucks. They've doubled the size of it. So we got all kinds of problems over there. I was there the other night, but it was all mellow and everything. But somebody posted on Facebook. They got over there, and there was an uprising inside of homeless people going nuts. So is that clock right, or we need to take a break? Time to take it. He said, regardless of the clock, we're going to break. So we got somebody else going to talk here for a minute. Stick around. We got 2.5 more hours. We're ending at noon. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back. At the break there, you heard a little advertisement on the trauma intervention program. I just wanted to mention, I will continue to mention it till we get there. We do an annual training. Every once in a while throughout the year, I get a call, and people say, hey, I heard about your program. I want to get involved. How do I do that? I want to start right now. And I said, oh, you can't start right now because we have an annual training you got to go through, and we just do it once a year. They think, oh, I don't want to wait. I can't believe Americans, they don't want to wait for anything, right? Just order pizza, order Chinese, order coffee. Everything's there in 5 minutes, right? So I said, no, you got to, it's a training. It's expensive, da-da-da-da. And I said, we just need to train once a year. So people sign up and then they wait, and then we let them know when the training is coming up. So if you've ever thought about, in fact, I had a call from a gentleman following the show last week, and he said, hey, I've been listening to it, and I listened to your show, and I'd like to try to be involved in that trauma intervention program. So can I? And I said, yeah, this is how to do that. So what we do real quickly is for now in our 25th year, we respond to 911 requests. Our 911 dispatchers in the Yuba Sutter County area call us when they're sheriffs, police officers, firefighters, or Pike County Ambulance or the hospital needs us to assist with a bad incident. And it could be any kind of incident that causes trauma to the survivors, fires, heart attacks, car crashes, whatever. And we provide emotional and practical support to those people that are trying to weather the storm, right? You ever been through a really bad situation in your family or really close friends, something bad happens to? It's nobody plans for that. Nobody knows how to handle it. You just kind of are thrown into it. And so we provide people to go to the scene, go to the river, go to the mountains, go to a commercial establishment, go to a farm where something happens, and provide assistance. So we train you to do that, and each TIP volunteer, once they're trained, a trauma intervention program volunteer, once they're trained, they commit to being on call for 3 12-hour shifts a month, and they help pick those shifts where they're just on call, and they don't have to go sit in a TIP building. They can just have their cell phone with them and respond from wherever they are. And then once a month, we have a training meeting. Pretty simple, but it's a simple but profound program in terms of impact. So if you're interested, the training starts on February 28th. That's an orientation. And then some of the people see the posters or the ads and think, wow, do I have to attend one of these days? Like the trainings March 1, 2, 3, 5, 7, 8, 9, different times during the day. During a week, it's at night. During the weekends, during the day. So it's the 28th, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9. And that's in March. So you can find out all the details by calling me at 530-713-1838, 530-713-1838, or just go to our website at yubasuttertip.org, and you can shoot me an email. But if you want to ask me questions, you can shoot an email and say, hey, I'm interested, and then I'll call you. Or you could just simply call me at 530-713-1838, and I'll answer any questions you have and get you hooked up to come to the orientation. Very simple. It's going to be training, all the trainings here in Yuba City, off Garden Highway at one of the Yuba City training centers. The city of Yuba City lets us use their facilities. Very kind to them for many, many years. The city of Yuba City has been a big supporter of trauma intervention and believe in it and facilitate its existence here. So if you're interested, if you live in the Yuba Sutter County area, we have one volunteer that actually lives all the way up in Gridley. She's able to do it as well. So if you live in right on the edge of Butte County, you could actually still be involved as well. So, okay, that's that. So at the break, we were before we came back, we were listening to this clip on the Obama wall. You remember the media, the fake media, said Obama does not have a 10-foot wall around his house. You remember him saying that? Well, if you look at that video from Daily Caller, that was from the Daily Caller. I mean, the whole street is blocked off. Have you seen it? Yeah, you've seen it. The whole street, it's got like, all those concrete barriers and then there's actually, how you could leap over a concrete barrier. So then they got these fence type things where it'd be more difficult to climb over the fence type things in between the concrete barrier. So, plus they got live guards, right? I mean, it's unbelievable what they have. And then the media goes on and has the gall to tell you that they give the impression like you could walk right up to their front door and take them a bouquet of flowers. It's so absurd, man. The media is so fraudulent. It's unbelievable. So I was just thinking about walls in this area. Hey, can you think of any walls around this area that are protecting anything? The wall that I think of is at the Yuba City Police Department, of all places. I mean, they're loaded with weapons in there, right? I mean, they probably even got grenades in there and stuff. But they have a big old wall around their facility, not the front, but they have electric gates and the whole thing to get in. Now, the Yuba County Sheriff's Department just created their building, and they have a gated, fenced area around where they park their cars and where they keep their patrol cars and all that kind of stuff. So they also have kind of a protected area as well. I can't think of any others, though. I think maybe even Caltrans has a fenced area now for all their vehicles. Over there where they have that palace they built on B Street, that it's the fanciest building in the two counties, actually. Well, maybe the courthouse is in Sutter County. But it's fascinating because people are posting on Facebook that in 2006, there was a security fence bill that was passed by the Democrats. I don't know whether you remember that. And Obama voted for it. All of them voted for it that are now claiming they're against it. Schumer and all of them. And it was to fence something like 700 miles of border. And this was when, so we had Schumer, Pelosi, Obama, all of them. It passed. It passed. And some people are saying that there was, if you read the bill, which I copied and put somewhere on this list here today, it's called the Secure Fence Act of 2006. You can Google it, and on Wikipedia, it has a write-up on it. The only thing I couldn't figure out was people are saying that there was $50 million allotted to it, $50 million, and they wondered where the money went. And I don't really know. But the interesting thing is they voted for a fence. It was a double-layer fence, and then they amended that and to come up with a different, they've always debated the technique and the style of the fence. But all these people, here we are 12 years back, or 13 years back, and they all voted for this fence, didn't have a problem about it then. But you know how every once in a while we'll talk and I'll write articles for the Territorial Dispatch on money that was wasted by the government for really foolish stuff. And, it's interesting. A lot of times people forget that the government, the money they have, all came from you and me. They take it from us, and then they give it away to people that they like, right? So let me tell you some, it said some ways that these folks spent the money. In 2018, the Fed spent $4.173 trillion overall. $4.173 trillion. The White House is asking for over $5 billion. Okay? So that means the border wall would amount to just 1/10 of 1% of current annual federal spending. 1/10 of 1% of the current annual federal spending. Okay? And so I've had people say to me, Lou, do you really think a wall would stop people? I got a wall between me and Taco Bell. No one has ever come over the wall, right? I think they want to stay over there where the burritos are, and the bean burritos and the tacos. There's nothing attractive over at my place, but there's a wall there. And when they've knocked down the house, when the guy died behind me, and they knocked down his house and bought the property, they convinced me. He said, Lou, we'll put a big wall up there if you won't protest that we're going to put a drive-through right behind you, right? So I hear all the music of all the people driving through and then ordering their tacos and burritos. And so they said, Lou, we'll put up a big wall, an 8-foot-high wall. I don't think it was quite 8 foot high, but it's concrete wall. They weren't going to put no slats, no steel slats. So there's this big wall, and that was to provide me comfort. And so walls work. Now, here's some crazy things that Democrats have voted for. They call it the Rural Utility Service. This program costs taxpayers $8.2 billion a year. You think, what do you mean rural utilities? They don't have, in America, they don't have power out there? And it says that actually has no actual purpose anymore. It used to be back in the day, probably before your day. The goal was to bring electricity to rural communities. I don't know whether you've traveled much, but have you been to any place in the United States where there was no power? I have not. So long ago, we have succeeded in bringing power. In fact, I've been all over Vietnam, and it's amazing. They got a little power, and they got a little TV set out in the middle of nowhere. They don't have anything else. Hogs are running around through the house and everything, but they got power. It's now being used, this rural utility service, at $8.2 billion a year. The money is being used to bring internet access to small communities. We can't count on private industry do this. However, it says there's no indication the beneficiaries of this expensive government agency actually even appreciate the program, and the majority of its projects are not completed on time or within budget. That's $8.2 billion a year. Sugar subsidies. We're the fattest people on earth, right? We don't need to eat so much sugar, but Congress subsidizes the production of unhealthy foods like sugar and high fructose corn syrup. You know that? If we eliminated sugar subsidies alone, it would be $6 billion, or enough to do the wall every year. And you wouldn't be so fat. Everybody I know is overweight. I don't know anybody that's underweight. I think Dr. Cassidy, I was talking to him on the phone. He says he and his wife are, he said, I'm getting skinny. He is skinny. So I think he's the only person that's complying with the weight rules. Everybody else is overweight. The United Nations. Who loves the United Nations? I don't know anybody of my friends that wants the United Nations. In 2016, our tax dollars went, 10 billion of them went to United Nations. We could have built the wall with that money. There's nothing united about the nations. That thing is all they're doing is attacking us, and we provide them free real estate, handle the sewage and the electricity, do the whole thing. We could get rid of that thing and be on our way. $5 billion of those dollars are itemized for abortions in foreign country. We're spending the amount of money on the United Nations for abortion that we could be building a wall with. How about this? Community development grants. These grants were created in the 70s. Most of you weren't even born back then. To revitalize failing cities. But the program has always been plagued with rip-offs and dysfunction. The grants have gone not to poor cities, but wealthy communities and other recipients that failed to produce accountability and results. In other words, the money just disappeared down a dark hole, and we didn't get anything of it. If we eliminated it, it would save us $15 billion over 5 years. That's $3 billion a year. Amtrak. How many of you love Amtrak? Why don't we just have the United States government take over all the airlines and all the cruise ships? Why do we have a train that's paid for by taxpayers? If we sold Amtrak, we wouldn't eliminate it. You just sell it to private enterprise and they'd make money on it. Over the next 5 years, we could save $9.7 million with selling Amtrak. Plus, you get to sell all the assets. My brother used to work for the government, and he used to maintain, after he worked on nuclear submarines, he painted them. After he did that, he got a job maintaining empty buildings for the government. And the U.S. government, in 2016, it owned 3,120 buildings that were vacant. Just vacant buildings. They had no use for them right now. And another 7,859 buildings that were partially empty. And current law requires that the government, to get rid of a building, needs to go through a lot of steps. Like at Yuba County Office of Education, we had some properties that we wanted to sell when I was still on the board. And in order to do that, you can't just do something quick and underhanded. It prevents fraud or you selling a piece of property to somebody you like. And so you have a set of rules you have to follow in a government to get rid of property. You form a committee. They have to go out and have the thing researched, appraised, produce a portfolio. There's steps. So anyway, current law requires the government to undergo a series of steps before considering a sale of the buildings. If this was prioritized, the 5-year savings are estimated at $15 billion, $3 billion a year. Maintaining the unused buildings cost up $1.7 billion a year. We just maintain the buildings and we don't get jack diddly out of them. It's just ridiculous. Foreign aid. How about foreign aid? It's interesting to me. We give money to people that cuss us out and throw nails under our tires. Putin. We give money to Russia, Egypt, South Sudan, Uganda, South Africa, Zambia. $50 billion a year at least. More than $50 billion. Cutting those donations back by 10% would be enough to fund the whole wall. Why are we doing all this anyway? I don't want to do it. Do you want to do it? If we all don't want to do it, how come we're still doing it? They don't pay any attention to you, do they? What's wrong with this government? How about these? These will freak you out, freak me out. The Fed spent almost $614,000 to boost the intimacy and trust of transgender women and their male partners. So I know what you're thinking. How does the sexuality work out? That's a transgender woman. That means a woman that once was a man, and now, right? She's a faux FAUX woman, but she's got herself a man, right? It's something when you get confused over which way to the beach. So we got $614,000 to help transgender women develop intimacy and trust with their male counterparts. In other words, we got two males with one that's faking it to be a female, right? The Fed spent $5 million paying hipsters to stop smoking and then blog about it. $5 million. Northwest University received more than $3 million in National Institute of Health money to watch hamsters fight. They injected some of them with steroids, then put another hamster in the cage to see if the drugged rodents were more aggressive when protecting their territory. I think we have more money than we know what to do with is the problem. Fed spent $1,009,762 training social justice math teachers. In other words, it's not just good enough to teach math, but somehow we need to slip in there racism and gender identity. The government spent at least $518,000 in federal grants to study how cocaine affects the sexual behavior of Japanese quail. I've always wondered that myself. I woke up in the morning one day and I thought, Japanese quail, are they compatible? And what would happen if they slipped into some cocaine and put their beak in it? Have you ever heard of the Federal Register? It's sort of a journal that everything that happens back there in Washington is noted in. So it legally, every decision, everything, every expenditure, has to be listed. So it's sort of you go back and you can reflect upon a diary. It's like a diary of the United States. So then it has to be distributed to all congressional offices, despite most never, ever reading it. All the information is always available online, but we still do the actual paper one. Costs $1 million a year to do that. On and on and on it goes. So you see how totally stupid this is, that we just can't, it's just not a good value. Somebody wrote, for $5 billion, we're going to save $150 billion because that's how much we're spending on illegals when you add it all together. Isn't that amazing? So I got a text from the folks over in Idaho. Do you know, in just the last year or two, I have friends that I used to hang out with, now in Texas, Idaho, Washington, and then I just had lunch with a friend last Saturday after the show, and I said, oh, what's up? How you doing? He said, I'm moving. He said, I'm selling my house. I'm retiring, and I'm moving to Missouri. So now I've got Missouri, Washington, Idaho, Texas. So I sent a text over to Idaho, and I says, what's the price of fuel and how cold is it? Because that's what I'm concerned about. So he says gas at Fred Meyer last week was $2.45. This is Rick. And with my discount, I paid $2.15. That's almost $1 less. I think it's $3.09 out there where I buy it in Linda. And he says it's 31 degrees this morning. So I don't know what it's here. It feels cold in here this morning. 44. It's 44 at Mount Huth, and we're inside, but no heat. Can't play the heat. You can rent, and you could go on the air, but you bring your own heat. So we got to figure out how to bring our own heat. You got any of those little heaters we can put under the deal? We can't find one around. We just got to bring it in. So this is got regular unleaded. Fred Meyer, that's the place to go get your gas out there and where these folks are in Idaho. So Idaho, Texas, the state of Washington. You know Rob, remember Rob that came out? He was on the show here one time. He and his wife, she's a nurse. She was a top nurse over there at the ER. They just said, we've had it. And they went to Gig Harbor, Washington. Gig Harbor. So now let's just stay on this. We're going to we need to take a break. One more minute. So I'm going to talk when we come back. California has spent over equivalent of the wall on the bullet train to nowhere. $5 billion so far. But bullet train. And by the way, a lot of you out there voted for that. I just want to tell you, I did not vote for it. I remembered that and some of you thought, oh, yeah, I want to get on some cheap train. I don't even know where it's going to start. It doesn't start near me. I'm going to drive over there, leave my car somewhere, get on a train, and go down to L.A. How stupid is that? So we're coming back. We got 2 more hours, so if you want to hang around, do so. Well, we're going to do another hour. This is our second hour, and we'll be done at noon, and then some sports talk guys are coming in. So we were just getting refreshed here while we were listening to all that stuff go on at the break. Let's see. I wanted to mention about this fence. I want to talk about this wall and this fence some, and the total hypocrisy about these fences. Now, all these people, these wealthy people, as you heard earlier, I think it was Trump at the very beginning of the show, talking about rich people building fences, walls to keep people out. I don't blame them. If you want privacy, I had a friend up there in the Yuba County foothills, and he let somebody hunt some turkey on his property. And they shot a turkey, and it wounded it, and it flew across the fence, and it flew into the guy's next property. And they went over there to track the turkey and pick him up. And some boys showed up on the other side of the fence with weapons. And they were all marijuana growers over there. So I get it. You have fences to protect you, right? And they say all these marijuana grows up there have these big old gnarly gates and dogs and guns, right? So it makes sense, and it makes sense to everybody else, everywhere else. I was driving, the PG&E, Pacific Gas and Electric Corp Yard on A Street in Marysville. I drive around there sometime. I think it's there that they have what they call a chain link fence, and then at the top they got the razor wire through there. Keep people out. They don't want people stealing all their items. So that's kind of a cool thing, the razor wire. So it just works everywhere else. And, we just play stupid when we listen to these people that are on television. It's just like the stupid box is what you're watching, the stupid box. So there's I've never seen this publication, but it's called Vice News. And Vice News has a headquarters in Hollywood. Los Angeles area, I guess. And they have written article after article about attacking the wall. But yet, they have a lot of homeless around there, and they have a a wire and chain link fence around their building to keep the homeless out of the Vice Media's offices on Venice Boulevard. So if you're down there in L.A., go visit Vice Media and take a photograph of that chain link fence. But they've written lots of articles like Trump's wall won't stop climate change migrants, how drugs will get under and over and around the Trump wall. Trump's wall doesn't scare these seasoned da-da-da. F Trump's wall. Trump's border wall will literally split this town. Trump's Mexico border wall would be an ecological disaster. Trump's wall would just cause, but yet they put a wall around their business to keep out the homeless. The hypocrisy, it's like does not, I had a lady, somebody said, I've had people bring this up to, I said, what? Did you actually graduate from high school? They let you out? I mean, they pass you because you were like mentally retarded? They just moved you along? Because they say, well, do you think though? Well, it would take such a long ways. Nobody knows how much this is costing us, but say, oh, you mean you're going to put a wall along the whole border? I said, yeah, what's wrong with that? We build amazing stuff all the time. If you need it, you need it, right? If you need it, you need it. Like somebody's the other day, a friend of mine had to have their chest opened up and had an open heart surgery. If you need it, you need it. You can either drop dead or you have to go spend the money and get your chest cracked open, right? So there's some gnarly stuff going through the south border. I'm not going on what I read or hear. I'm actually talking to people that were in the business, right? In fact, there was in 1969 or 70, I got involved. I drove a car to the Mexican border and got a young hippie guy. They paid him some money, and they threw up hundreds of pounds of marijuana over the fence. And he rescued it and brought it up when we distributed it in California. It just to say that fences don't help or they're of no consequence is just absolutely the stupidest thing. People that think that way shouldn't be allowed to have kids. It's crazy. So now at the border, we're having an actual assault on the border. When you have 10 or 15 people today, it's no big deal. But when you have 10,000, 5,000, border authorities are referring 50 people a day for urgent medical care, including tuberculosis, flu, and even pregnant women about to give birth. Can you imagine women right at the verge of delivering, getting up to the border just so they'll let them in the country to deliver a baby? And I'm telling you, if one of these schools around our area, one of the kids gets diagnosed as having tuberculosis, the whole school, all the parents have a meltdown. Just one kid, because now their kids got exposed to tuberculosis, and we have just like tons of them along the border coming in. And the treatment of TB is no small thing. It's a big old gnarly deal. Most of those in need of care are children. It's amazing that these parents are intentionally bringing sick children to the border. Why wouldn't you? Because they can't afford any medical care in Mexico. So they dump them up here in the United States. A staggering 28% of the kids are under 5, having been dragged along the trip by parents to use them as leverage to get in the U.S. Kevin McAleenan, commissioner of the Border Patrol, said most of those needing help were ill when they arrived at the border. You know, and the media says, we killed them. Oh, Trump killed them. Trump was down there stabbing them with a dull butter knife till they died, slit their throat. They don't want to talk about illegal aliens cutting the throats of people and stabbing them to death, but Trump killed that kid. How dare we kill a kid? You know something? Kids die in every city in the United States every day. Did you know that? Major cities. Kids die. It just happens. People die. People die every day here. Did you know that? In the Yuba Sutter area. Every single day, somebody's dying. Sometimes multiple people are dying. Nobody's throwing a big fit. Nobody blames it on Trump. Nobody has a news conference. Children die. It's a sad thing. But many were ill before they even left their home, wherever they came from, 500,000 miles away. So the Border Patrol people said these people have pneumonia, tuberculosis, parasites, and none of that develops instantly. They've had it for a long time. So they spotted a new trend in Central America, traffic from Central America. Smuggling organizations are using commercial buses. If you just think this is a random thing, you obviously are an idiot. People are down there using money from people like George Soros and even people probably like Tom Steyer to organize commercial bus loads of people to get them through the journey in less than a week from Central America to the San Ysidro border crossing in Tijuana. So they're coming up from Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras. I met a gal in the Yuba County Jail, a really nice lady, very sweet. She cannot speak any language. She can speak Spanish, but she cannot write or read any language on earth. She's what they would say illiterate. She can speak Spanish. So here she is in the Yuba County Jail, and El Salvador's trying to extradite her back to the country because they say she did a crime back there. That's unique. So she's been up here for 7 years illegally in San Francisco, the sanctuary city. Totally illiterate. What kind of job do you think she's got? Who do you think paid for her? Who do you think's picking up the tab on her children down there? So we're hospitalizing people at the border as they come up sick. What country do you think, if it was reversed and you went down to Mexico and you checked into a hospital, you think they'd treat you for free? Honestly, people, you must be taking LSD. You're out of your mind. I talk to people that are from Mexico all the time, and they're locked up in Yuba County Jail. You know, people know they're going to win the lottery in life big when you're not serving a sentence, but you're voluntarily sitting in Yuba County Jail for years, appealing your case to stay in this country. You're hoping and praying that an immigration judge will forgive you for hauling heroin, beating up somebody, driving over somebody, getting 4 DUIs in a row, beating up your wife, something, right? Stealing, defrauding people. And then after you serve that time, they stay here, and they stay here for 1, 2, 3 years, or maybe even more, appealing their case until the government finally says, you appealed long enough, you're out of here. They put you on a plane. Did you know we fly all these people back to the hometown? All these immigrants, when we deport them, the U.S. taxpayer flies them back. I had a massage gal from China. She said, I don't want to stay here any longer, Lou. She was in broken English. She was learning English in jail. And she just signed a sheet of paper, deport me, and the Homeland Security put her on a plane and flew her to Shanghai. She said, I'm going back home. I'm giving up on this American husband I hooked up with. He's ridiculous, right? Did you know that? We take care of them, $100 a day probably, provide them attorneys, transport to and from court. They don't go to court in Marysville in Yuba County. They got to go to Sacramento if they're lucky and go on a video system, or they go all the way to San Francisco to get up and close with the immigration judge, right? And if you remember that Jerry Brown signed a bill that had we're paying millions out of our California taxes to provide free representation for folks up here illegally. So that one girl, the deaths of a 7-year-old girl and an 8-year-old boy in Border Patrol custody in December have drawn terrible people just crying cutting them. The Democrats were cutting themselves and stabbing themselves and tearing their clothes and throwing ashes up in the air. That Trump has blood on his hands. So the girl arrived with her father as part of a group of more than 160 people at a remote part of the border in New Mexico. Hours from the nearest Border Patrol station. They arrive out in the boondocks, hours. Her father at first told agents she was totally healthy. He lied to them, but later alerted them when she began to vomit and then lose consciousness. Agents revived her twice, and she was flown by air ambulance. For you out in Olivehurst and Linda, that's called a helicopter. How many times you ridden in a helicopter when you were sick? I don't even know anybody that ever been in a helicopter when they were sick. They revived her twice after they irresponsibly hauled her up to out in the middle of nowhere. Agents revived her twice and then flew her by air ambulance, where she later died when she suffered major organ failure. That would be the Mexicans' fault, not anybody up here in the United States. On and on it goes. Lie after lie after lie after lie. Media lie, 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 lie. We are just being barraged by criminals and knuckleheads at the border. And then we have media people that are just total idiots. Lying, lying, lying. The boy that died in custody up here, her mother back in Guatemala told Reuters News that they had been told by neighbors that if they brought the child up to the border from Guatemala, I don't know, you know where Guatemala is? They don't teach this in school anymore, so people probably think Guatemala is over near the Soviet Union. Guatemala is right below the state of Oaxaca in the southernmost part of Mexico. You go Mexico, all the way down through Mexico, then you get into Guatemala. Their neighbors said, oh, you know how people talk trash? People talk trash in my neighborhood. They don't know what they're talking about. Neighbors said if they brought the child, the father would get more lenient treatment by U.S. authorities and would be quickly released into the U.S. where he could disappear. This is what the wife said. He could disappear into the shadows and live in the U.S. illegally and find work. That's what the word is in Guatemala. So when people are told that, that's why they're coming up. During the Obama administration, and remember the surge of what they called the unaccompanied alien children, authorities reported massive chicken pox and other communicable disease outbreaks. The number of children crossing nowadays exceed that previous surge. It's even gotten worse, with 22,000 children nabbed at the border last month in December. And out of about 60,000 total immigrants who were either caught or sneaking in or were in, so 22,000 out of 60,000 were caught coming through, were kids. So we're just picking up the tab on all those people. It's just a total ripoff. All right. Let's see. We got time here. So I love this. People say, oh, people are asking me this week, what do you think about the shutdown? I said, I'm thrilled about the shutdown. Just shut it down. Don't even open it up. Just shut it down. Non-essential services, that means they're not essential. I don't need them. I'm not missing anything. I'm tired of getting fondled by TSA people anyway. Let them go fondle somebody else. Maybe go fondle their next door neighbor. They got it. They're professionals at it. Now, sir, I'm going to grab you in your crotch. Is that okay with you? Do you have anything hidden down there? Now I'm going to put my finger in your rear end, right? Just like unbelievable. They teach people this stuff, right? What do you want to be when you grow up, son? I want to be a TSA agent and grab people by the wiener. Just like, come on, man. It's like you wonder why you brought the kid into existence. You birthed this kid, you send him to school, and now he's going to be a TSA agent. And now they're out there whining. So this guy wrote this article. Sorry, the title, Sorry, I didn't feel sorry for furloughed feds. I don't feel sorry for them. So it says, now that the nation has heard the president explain how he wants to address our immigration crisis, and we have all enjoyed the comic relief of Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer in lieu of a serious response, the media have launched a propaganda campaign they hope will pull the Democrats from the ditch they have driven into regarding the wall. He says most Americans regard idle and bureaucrat as synonyms. Out there in Oliver's, that means synonym doesn't, that's not a like a cinnamon roll. It's synonym, not cinnamon. And it's the same. Idle and bureaucrat is the same in the mind of most Americans. You remember the guy who was, Gina McCarthy was the head of the Environmental Protection Agency, and one of her top guys who came up with the whole thing on air pollution. He disappeared for years. Remember him? And he told her that he was now working for the CIA, even though he's being paid by her. And she bought it. He was just staying home, kicking back, watching television, eating bonbons. It's like, oh yeah, we got this. We can't lay one more person off. For those of us, he says, the writer says, who have spent our lives toiling in the private sector where employees actually are expected to produce something, non-essential worker, in quotes, is a concept that has no meaning. In the real world, beyond the Beltway, that's Washington, businesses hire people because they have some essential task that must be performed. I try to tell people in juvenile hall and jail, I says, listen, it's not about you. If you don't fulfill the essential task in a proper way quickly, everybody goes broke and you lose your job. Don't be all self-focused. So unless we accomplish the essential task, all hell breaks loose in the private sector. Thus, we aren't often moved to tears out here in the private sector when told that non-essential workers, oh my God, they will be sent home because of a government shutdown. Yet major news outlets expect us, they try to sway us by, listen to this, this is so absurd. What is really disappointing is people get taken in by this. Here's a story written in the Wall Street Journal. They said, Rusty Long is debating which bills to pay and which to hold off on as he plans to miss his first paycheck on Friday, along with hundreds of thousands of federal employees. We're not going to eat, said Rusty. We're cooking. Sorry, let me say it a different way. Here's what he actually said. We're not going to eat out. When I read that, he wasn't going to eat out, I thought my heart sank. He's in America and he cannot afford to go out to eat. That's a sin. Don't steal. Don't have sex with your neighbor. And you don't have to cook for yourself anymore. Go eat out. Everybody has an entitlement to eat out. So he says, this is, quote, this is actually in the Wall Street Journal. Rusty says, we're not going to be able to go out to eat. We're going to have to cook every meal at home. Life is coming to an end. And there were conversations about what we'd have to stop if we needed to. And what could I do to bring additional income home? I thought we have those conversations without being laid off, right? We have those conversations without being laid off. So this guy says, I'm sure Rusty and his family are great folks, but he's an architect. The guy is an architect working for the agricultural department. The question is, the guy says, I have no idea why the bloated bureaucracy needs architects, but I'm willing to bet he could find a good job outside of government. So the first question that occurred to me when I read the story was, why is money being removed from my paycheck and given to such people in the first place, like Rusty? And as human tragedies go, that the Longs, Rusty Long and family, are forced to manage their budget carefully and are unable to eat out often, just doesn't impress me that much. Now, the Washington Post said this, hundreds of furloughed federal workers, contractors, union representatives, and supporters gathered in the brisk winter and bitter, cold, thirsty. I thought, I don't know whether I can take any more. It's cold out. I thought, it's cold in California. I thought, so put a coat on. So anyway, they went and they protested in front of the White House where Mr. Trump was, instead of protesting down the street where Nancy Pelosi and Schumer were. Trump does not vote on this wall thing. Schumer and Pelosi are holding the thing up. Why don't they protest in the other spots? In fact, Trump, when they were standing in front of the White House in the bitter cold, he was down on the border, taking a tour of the border, looking at kilos of heroin. Unbelievable. There's just this amazing disconnect. Now it's an emergency to build a useless wall instead of declaring an emergency to fund 800,000 workers who are going without pay, which therefore is disabling us from paying our rent, bills, and buying groceries. Unbelievable. We going to take a break? We're going to take a break. We'll finish up this when we come back. It's 10:30, and we'll be here for, I guess we're going to stay for another half a show. We got a half a show to go yet. Hang around.
Did you know that California was never supposed to be just one state? Before the state was formed in 1850, there was discussion of forming 3 states instead of 1. California has an area larger than 7 East Coast states combined, and it takes 14 hours to drive from one end of the state to the other. California is simply too large to govern. Rural communities are being outvoted by more densely populated areas. The state of Jefferson is the solution. Please visit SOJ51.net to show your support.
Check out the Territorial Dispatch. The paper is a weekly and can be obtained free at distribution or by mail through subscription. It's the only locally owned and operated newspaper in the region. The paper is the rest of the story. And also check out the E-Territorial. It's an online version of the Territorial Dispatch which features local news and events for the Yuba Sutter, Colusa, and Nevada County areas. You'll also find daily and breaking news updates, current traffic, and weather information, along with a calendar of local events. Visit the E-Territorial at eterritorial.com.
All right, so we're into the second half of this show today. If you just kind of caught up with us, this is Live with Lou Benninger. We're here for another hour and a half, and we've been talking about the shutdown, the supposed shutdown. So supposedly they call this non-essential services, folks that are not working, and other people are working without pay. And so sometimes you might be deceived by the media to thinking that they won't ever get their pay. They eventually pay them. And so David Catron, if you want to read this article, it's in the American Spectator, and he says, I don't feel sorry for him, right? In fact, it was President Reagan, Ronald Reagan, in the 1970s when the air traffic controllers, who were now unionized, went out on strike against violating the law. And in response to that, Reagan fired the whole bunch of them, and it never was resolved, and they hired all new people. They all lost their jobs permanently. It was over. And it was Franklin Delano Roosevelt that stated way back as a staunch liberal that employees of the United States government or government in general shouldn't be allowed to organize and strike as a union because their commitment is to serve the people of the United States, and they have a unique job and unique benefit. And so David Catron's article, he said, again, call me cynical, but the average government attorney makes about $123,000 per year. Private sector attorneys make more on the average, but they are required to actually do more than merely show up at the office each day. This attorney, wouldn't last over a month in a private law practice. He also makes it clear that he disagrees with the chairman of the board. In other words, this attorney hates Trump, the chairman of the board, and his useless wall. In the private sector, you have two choices. You can implement the vision of the chairman of the board or do the honest thing and resign, right? In other words, you can be in the private sector and you can maybe have your own opinion, but if you want to work for the company and work for the boss, you do what he says. Otherwise, go get yourself another job, right? But what you have now is a massive, primarily these federal workers are Democrat workers. They hate Trump, and they're doing everything they can to undermine what he wants to do. You can never do that in the private sector. It says a deep state lawyer takes the taxpayers' money and undermines the will of the voters. It's just a total ripoff. I totally agree with this guy. So, all right. So we have a Starbucks near where I live in Marysville. It's actually, design-wise, it's one of the busier Starbucks in the two counties of Yuba and Sutter, and it's a big one. They doubled the size of it recently. And it's interesting to me how a company can have some really bright ideas and come up with some great approaches to business and make a lot of money and have franchises, or not franchises, but outlets everywhere, including foreign countries, and then do something really stupid like say anybody can come in here and camp out and our toilets are available to anybody that wants to come in and trash them. And so what happened in Starbucks as they put the word out is like over there where the Starbucks is just a block away from where I live, the homeless would go through the trash and dump all the trash out. Bottles would be breaking, glass on the concrete, come in, shower up in the bathrooms, right? And so in some of the Starbucks, I don't know whether it's the Marysville Starbucks, but some of them, they were finding needles in the bathrooms where they would, with all their garbage bags, they're carrying all their stuff in, their used needle would fall out, right? They've been using it over and over again, and it would dump out on the ground. So instead of eliminating the people from coming in, like everybody's welcome here, doesn't matter how they behave. So I noticed on Facebook last night, I think it was, a friend posted that she was in Starbucks in Marysville, and there was a scene. Two homeless guys were in there. They'd been in there for 3/4 of an hour, and they were creating a scene. They just weren't sitting there, but they were creating a scene. So she finally called Marysville police to come and assist. It's interesting, you know, when I just wonder, because Starbucks isn't the only coffee place in town anymore, right? I mean, there's a lot of options. And I wonder if this is going to put a dent in their business. They got a new CEO. You know, Charles Schultz was the guy who was the CEO for years and years and years, and sort of is the guru of Starbucks. Now is not there, but he was the one who propagated this, like, hey, you know, we're the homeless, you know, it's all our fault that they're homeless, and therefore they're welcome in here and do whatever they want. That may be fine, but I don't think a lot of people that normally frequent Starbucks are going to want to mix it up with people that are peeing all over themselves and they're loaded on meth and going nutso. So anyway, Starbucks, to keep in the spirit of just y'all come, they're putting needle disposal boxes, you know, like they have in the hospitals and at your doctor's office. After they do something with a needle, they have a box, and they just slip it through the hole, and it can't get out of there. And then they take that box or the insertion inside the box, and they put it in a disposable bag, and they ship it out to a hazardous waste place, right? Because you don't know what people are carrying in their body, hepatitis C, whatever. So here you go inside of a bathroom at Starbucks, and they got a syringe container. So if they shot up in there, maybe there's some fluid on the sink, right? So supposedly 3,700 Starbucks workers signed a petition on coworker.org urging Starbucks to install needle disposal boxes in stores in areas at risk for hepatitis C or HIV. Now, they didn't ask for all stores, but just where there's a lot of hepatitis C or HIV. I don't know how they figure that out unless they're, because the government is not supposed to tell you who's got HIV. That's a secret now. So some of the boxes have already been installed in Seattle stores where employees have said, hey, there's a hypodermic needle on the floor in the bathroom, right? Pretty gnarly. Pretty gnarly. In October, 3 Starbucks employees told the media they took antiviral medication daily to protect themselves from HIV and hepatitis. Is that amazing? You go to work, I think they probably pay okay at Starbucks, but it isn't a huge amount of money to expose yourself. What if you'd picked up hepatitis C? Unbelievable. So that's what's happening. And so there was an incident. There's incidences all the time. And Monty Hecker with Elite Universal Security has his people. I see him almost every day because I'm running around the neighborhood. And I see the Elite Universal Security people working that corner. There's about 6 or 7 businesses in that area. CVS, there's a bank, there's a sandwich place, there's Panda Express, there's an AT&T outlet. But Starbucks, anyway, they just don't have enough law enforcement to manage this when government has essentially funded the homeless populations around the country. So I wanted to, this is so fascinating. If you want to see what liberal management of the country looks like, this is what you're seeing in these cities where they're sanctuary cities. What they are is, you remember the plantations, you probably read about them during slavery. We had wealthy plantation owners who were primarily all liberals who were in control of people. And now that's what these sanctuary cities have become, where they take care at a minimum level of homeless people, rich people, the plantation owners, clean up after the homeless people, right? So this is interesting. Everybody's probably heard of Tony Robbins, the inspirational guy, self-improvement speaker. So in March 2016, this is a San Francisco story for you. San Francisco is one of the wealthier cities in the United States, but it's totally a mess down there. People take photos with their phones of piles of human excrement up and down the streets. It's pitiful at the dysfunction of the leadership of San Francisco, and it doesn't matter which liberal you put in there; they're all as stupid as the one before. So, in 2016, March, Tony Robbins donated $750,000 to buy a new soup kitchen at 1930 Mission Street for a group of French nuns, N-U-N-S. For those that don't know, I find people today, young people, don't know what a nun is. That's a Catholic woman that's serving the church. So a group of French nuns had been operating a soup kitchen in the Tenderloin district of San Francisco, but really kind of some funky facilities. So somehow Tony Robbins heard about it, and he bought them a new spot at 1930 Mission Street. Now this, I'm going to talk when we come back about what's going on in Sutter County with the homeless, and when you have government get involved in anything, it gets really screwed up. You can look at what the DMV's doing right now. They can't even get you out a decent license. I want you to think if the government took over the food chain and food supply, whether we run out of food or not. I think we would. So anyway, Tony Robbins took his own money, $750,000, and thought, I'm going to do a solid for the poor, the people on the streets of the San Francisco, and I have confidence in the nuns. They're serving for free, right? We're not paying some government employee $175 to spray poop off the sidewalk. That's what they pay them down there. If you want a good job, you don't even need to know anything. You just know how to spray poop off the sidewalk. You get $175,000. So Tony, like me, I'd say, hey, the nuns are going to do the work. I like the nuns, and they'll do well and not costing us an arm and a leg. So I'm going to pop for the building. So that's what he did. He bought a new soup kitchen at 1930 Mission. And so that's in March 2016. And their goal was to move all the stuff they wanted to keep, the pots and pans and all the stuff, to have by the end of April, just 60 days later at most, be set up over at the new spot from the Tenderloin to the Mission area. Well, it was a big problem. Now, this is government at its best. So in December 2016, they were supposed to be in April, an article stated that residents in the soup kitchen's new building are trying to block the nuns from relocating there. The attorney for the Homeowners Association filed a letter. In other words, they're trying to say, we don't want it. We don't want a feeding operation here. The Planning Commission was slated to approve the commission in January of 2017. We started in March of 2016. Now we're still fighting over it in January of 2017, even though all they want to do is feed people. And while residents turned out in opposition, Tony Robbins was there along with Salesforce CEO Mark Benioff, Benioff. If you haven't heard of him before, he's the one that got the sales tax item on the back. It wasn't a sales tax item, but it was a new tax on businesses that have sales over $5 million. It was a 3%, whether or not you made a profit or not, 3% on top of your times your $5 million or more would go towards the homeless. That's Mark Benioff. So Mark Benioff shows up with Tony Robbins, and Benioff says, if we are not supporting these sisters, the nuns, then I don't know who we should be supporting. These are truly people who are doing God's work. Well, way to go, Mark Benioff. The commission backed the nuns, and according to January 12, 2017 story on the hearing, the sisters haven't said what day they will relocate. They're still not relocated, but they hope to pack up and move as soon as possible. They are in the Tenderloin area at the Turk Street location, not Turd. That would be what the San Francisco's called. So it just shows you, it says they're hoping to get the nuns into their whole new home before the 3-year mark passes. Now, this is government, right? If the government wasn't involved, there were no rules on that, they could have moved over there in 30 days. It reminds me of the people in the desert when God set the people free from Egypt to go over to Canaan land, and they could have made it over there straight away in a couple weeks. Instead, they went around in circles for 40 years. That was a government operation right there. 3 years, will they get in before 3 years? In fact, I think Mother Teresa wanted to set up an operation down there in San Francisco many years ago, and they jerked her around, and she just said, we're not going to do it. They want her to put an elevator, I think, in this multi-story deal, and she says, we don't mind carrying people, the women, we'll carry them up and down the stairs. If they can't go up and down, we will carry them. We do not need an elevator. They were old school. So she flipped them the bird and headed out of town. So that's just it. And so San Francisco, who has one of the worst homeless problems in the nation, cannot get out of their own way. Now, I'm going to talk about this coming week, Monday, January 14th. It says the Sutter County Ad Hoc Citizens Committee on Homelessness will meet at 6 p.m. at the Public Health Auditorium in Yuba City. But then it says, the agenda includes a report to the committee about the January 8th Board of Supervisors meeting when the board voted to apply for a grant of $365,000. But I think they're going to move. I think on another news release, they moved that. I'm going to have to figure this out, whether it's actually going to be at that meeting or that location, or it's going to be next door at the Veterans Center. The Public Health Auditorium's over there near the new courthouse. But they're going to discuss putting this homeless operation, tough sheds and fences. Did you notice they're putting a fence around the tough sheds, just like Robert Bendorf Zoo? Why would they put a fence there if it doesn't work? I thought, why put a fence up if there's no consequence? So while we take a break here, I'll double check the location, because at one of these notices I got from Public Information Officer Chuck Smith, they said there's something was going on at the Veterans Memorial Auditorium or Center or whatever they call that on Butte House Road. So we'll be back in a minute, and we'll dial in this homeless thing. We're going to solve homeless for just probably cost us about $10,000 a person here in a minute. All right, we'll be right back. I would like to decide whether the staff works diligently, not me. Like I could say, I'm a really good radio talk show host. Well, that don't make any sense, because that would be you to decide that. But I always get suspect when they say, over the past few months, staff worked diligently toward the establishment of a temporary emergency shelter by conducting the following activities. Look at all this stuff they did. If this was private sector, we'd have had this set up a year ago. Develop a shelter concept. We got to have a concept to serve the Sutter County homeless population. Provide staff support to the Homeless Shelter Location Advisory Committee, the Pike County Homeless Services MOU team, the Sutter County Homeless Consortium, and other groups working on the issue. My God, how many people? Can't we have 100? Let's have a few more subgroups. Then identified funding for homeless services and shelter construction, lessening the potential impact on Sutter County's general fund funding sources. And so here's where they're going to go get money. Now, I always say out there in Oliver, sometimes they'll call and they'll say, hey, you're always talking about getting this money from the grants, Who is Mr. and Mrs. Grant? We want to go get some money from them. Well, so most ignorant taxpayers think if it doesn't come out of the Sutter County General Fund that it's free money. I used to work in the auto business. I helped start an auto business in town here. And when I worked in the auto business, one guy came in, and at that time, he says he wasn't worried about the price of the car. He just says, or even the monthly payment. He just said, how much do I have to have down? And we said, we could do it with no down. He said, you mean it's free? I thought, we got a problem here. The car is free because he didn't have to put any money down, though he owed the entire amount by the month. So that's how taxpayers think. If it doesn't come out of the general fund, it's free money. Like down there in Sacramento, they're printing it, right? So the sources of money, listen to this. This will get your hair standing straight on end. State of California Homeless Emergency Aid Fund, HEAP. California Emergency Solutions and Housing Funds, SESH. Community Development Block Grant, CDBG. Funds through both Sutter County and the City of Yuba City funding sources such as and then Salvation Army and other nonprofit organizations. So they've now gone in league with Salvation Army because they threw Glad Tidings under the bus. After we didn't even want to do it, they came out to our church where I go out there, They came out there and solicited us to get involved. And then we said we'd be willing to help. Then they told us they hated us. Then they sent the detectives out there to threaten us from Sutter County Sheriff's Department. I thought, what? Say what? So they're going to develop infrastructure. Now check this out. If you wonder where your tax dollars are going, come on, baby. They're going to shelter up to 40 individuals, maybe, with an estimated cost of $365,000. I believe that's almost $10,000 a piece, or $9,000 and change a piece. Those are some fancy sheds right there. Now, when you wonder, why put up a fence around these homeless people? Are we trying to protect people from attacking the homeless, or for them getting out? We don't want them to give out. So site grading is going to cost $126,000. Perimeter fencing and gates, almost $40,000. Storage containers, almost $23,000. 10 tough shed units, $90,000. Those little tough sheds, $9,000 a piece. Man, that's the most expensive sheds I've ever seen. $90,000. Environmental site consultant. Yes, sir, we don't want to poison anybody. $40,000. Contingency. That's like tuna sandwich money. $46,000. Total $365,000. Now, it's just amazing. Now, the Salvation Army looks like they've recruited the Salvation Army to come in and help. Now, this is interesting. They use TSA. I wouldn't even get that term. They call the Salvation Army TSA. But anyway, I'll just stick with Salvation Army, or the Army. So they're going to pay, in addition to all this other money, they're going to pay the Salvation Army an estimated cost of $228,000 to take care of those homeless folks. So they're also going to provide security services for the shelter, estimated between 90. Monty Hecker at Elite Security, you ought to pay attention to this. Security service for the shelter estimated to cost between $90,000 and $120,000 per year. So they're going to try to go get money from all the grants, all the grant family, and block grant programs through CDBG and all these different funds. So anyway, I know, because I know some key people that work for the behavioral health, and they're having a meltdown over there. That's what some people would say. So that's that. Hey, by the way, I wanted to give a shout out. I was at Juvenile Hall Monday night, which is my habit. I go out to a restaurant and let them feed me. You know, I always like food that somebody else makes. It just tastes better. So I go to a restaurant on Monday night after I go to the jail, and I go over to Juvenile Hall. And one of the kids said, hey, I was listening to you on the radio. I didn't know you did a radio show. So I call them, because I can't call them. They say, Lou, give me a shout out by name. I said, I can't do that because you're juvenile. I can't even mention your name. It's like secret. We're trying to protect your identity. So why don't you straighten up, and then you could come out of there like a reformed kid, and then we don't have to mention your name and give you what they call a black mark on your record. So I just call you the Cannabis Club over there. So we're going to give a shout out to the Cannabis Club and encourage you that there's a lot of fun out here, and it's better than being locked up in a little box like a dog or some kind of an animal in that deal. So and you don't have to be slopped like a hog over there. And I know you get some good care, but it isn't as good as on the outside. I just want to encourage you that it's pretty good out here. And if you need some help, we'll help you get straightened out. I know some of you didn't get to pick your families. You just got issued whichever one you came with, and so it may get, if it's difficult, give me a shout out. You all have my number. We know we'll help you. But anyway, we'll leave that there. So I was just coming across this. I was just looking at this. Let me just read you this. This is 2006. When you hear Nancy and Chuck and Barack and all these people talk about how fences don't work and it's too expensive, and oh, we're so concerned about the budget. In 2006, October 26, 2006, it's called the Secure Fence Act of 2006. It directs the Secretary of Homeland Security within 18 months of the establishment of this act to take appropriate action to achieve operational control over U.S. international land and maritime borders, including systematic border surveillance through more effective use of personnel and technology, such as aerial vehicles, ground-based sensors, satellites, radar coverage, and cameras, and physical infrastructure enhancements to prevent unlawful border entry and facilitate border access by the U.S. Customs and Border Protection. So it just goes on and on and on, and it describes, it says, from 10 miles west of Tecate, California, port of entry, to 10 miles east of Tecate, port of entry. From 10 miles west of Calexico, California, port of entry, to 5 miles east of Douglas, Arizona, port of entry. And they wanted fenced completion by May 30 of 2008. And then from 5 miles west of Columbus, New Mexico, port of entry, to 10 miles east of El Paso, Texas. From 5 miles northwest of Del Rio, Texas, port of entry, to 5 miles south of Eagle Pass, Texas, port of entry, and 15 miles northwest of Laredo, port of entry, to Brownsville, Texas, port of entry. Requiring fence completion from 15 miles northwest of Laredo, port of entry, to 50 on it. In other words, very specific, miles and miles and miles of fence. Not the whole border, but they were making a shot at getting things more dialed in down there. So it just shows you that all the foo-for-all of Mr. Trump. Mr. Trump is doing exactly, if he was a far-left Democrat and he wanted to secure the border, I would be on his page. I am not partisan in that way. If they're doing what I think is right, I'm with them 100%. So Trump is not, in fact, do you notice that a lot of Republicans do not want a wall because they want that cheap slave labor? They're like those old liberal plantation owners. They just want to take advantage of people. Did you get that computer rebooted? Did it reboot? Huh? It's all right.
Could you hear something just now?
No, I didn't hear anything.
Okay. I won't know until we go to the commercial break.
Oh, okay. We're still working on it.
Yep.
So I don't really care. We'll just do the show. I don't care. We'll
just forget the commercial break. Okay.
Well, I mean, we can try it. We can try it.
Try it and then go
We're
back
doing a
and
little. Sorry, folks. We're having to do online maintenance. It's like you're flying the jet and you think, hey, the coffee's not working. We need to talk about it. So anyway, let's move on from the border. It's just so ridiculous. So anyway, I think I was finishing by saying it didn't matter to me who it was. I don't really care who gets credit for stuff. I just want stuff to work right? And I don't like to see people get killed. I don't like to see the Ronell Singhs of the world get killed, or other officers or Border Patrol get spit on, hit with rocks, etc., get stomped, etc. I don't like it, and I want a wall. I don't like that, and I don't like the steel thing. I think they'll just cut right through it. They'll just go out. These Mexicans, they know how to use a cutting torch. They'll just cut the sucker down. So I've been watching this lady. Her name is Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, right? And she is now a congresswoman, and she says she's a socialist, and she reminds me of a Hugo Chavez. You remember Hugo Chavez? He was he came from the poor of Venezuela, and everybody just went nuts over Hugo Chavez, and he turned Venezuela from one of the most prosperous, Democrat, free amazing countries in South America, the strongest country in South America, loaded with oil. And he ruined that country by taking control of all the business. And now, even though they have some of the biggest resources of oil in the whole world, they now are importing gasoline. I want you to just think about that. They ran off all of the technical people that knew how to explore, drill, maintain, pump, create piping systems, refine oil. They ran all those people off, and they said, we'll do it ourselves because we're Venezuelans. And now their whole country's collapsing. They took over the food supply. They have a czar of food supply. And so when you go to the stores in Venezuela, the shelves are empty because that's the quality of food supply you get when your government takes over something. So whatever the government takes over, prepare for a collapse in that segment. So what if they take over the making of driver's licenses, or if they take over health, you're going to have a collapse in those services. That's happening in Obamacare. So Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is now what they call the darling of the left. And she's fashioned herself sort of as the Hugo Chavez of the working class and the poor of America. And so, but recently, the state of New York, where she serves, or she lives and represents an area, but she's actually in the Congress of the United States. They fined her for failing to carry workers' compensation coverage. Now, this is amazing. Now, I hated, when I managed companies, I hated all these government mandates that we had to pay a certain amount of money for wages. I want to pay whatever I want, whether I want to pay lots more or lots less, depending on the person. The mandate to carry certain kinds of insurance, like workers' compensation insurance and liability insurance and all that kind of stuff. So it's one thing, I can complain about it, but I go ahead and pay it because it's the law, and I try to obey the law, right, if I'm running a company like that. So they say you have to post all these posters all over your break room to tell workers that you might be a lousy employer and they can sue you. And now they have these probably sexual harassment signs that you have to put up. Just a whole wall full of government. And so it's interesting that Ocasio-Cortez claimed that she was for the people. And yet she failed to take out workers' compensation insurance. And which protects her people. So the Workers' Compensation Board, Melissa Stewart, said the employer did not have the required workers' compensation coverage from March 31, 2018 to April 30th, 2018. And so they penalized her $1,500, and she paid it. Now, the fascinating thing to me is it's so often that liberals, and I have a lot to say about conservatives as well, but it's liberals, the ones that are lecturing us all the time, right? Oh, yeah, well, you know, people should have guaranteed food, guaranteed health, guaranteed free food, free health, free education, health care. And yet, she, without workers' compensation, if her employee gets injured, then she's on the hook to pay for it, which I'm fine with. I think a company ought to have the right to pay for it out of their pocket instead of pay for all this compensation. So anyway, she says this woman. I've never really followed her because I don't like to watch. I don't have a television hooked up, but she's a 29-year-old who clobbered her incumbent Democrat from New York, Joe Crowley, right? She just clobbered the dude. So she says, this is amazing. I cannot tell you, she says, the amount of dysfunction that this president is advancing. I thought, what's that mean? She says, we now have over 100 new members of the freshman class. I cannot even get laptops to my caseworkers in the Bronx and Queens so they can process the needs of our constituents. Now, I didn't think that was the President of the United States' job to get laptops for the office of the Congresswoman from the Bronx and Queens. She says we cannot get the casework started because we cannot even get laptops in the hands of our district offices because the president has decided to hold the paychecks of everyday Americans hostage so that he can fulfill his campaign. I don't even want to call it a promise, a campaign fantasy that the vast majority of Americans disapprove of. Honestly, this person, I don't think she's I don't think she has her brain working right. I don't know if she did a lot of drugs. I don't want to make fun of her. It just seems crazy what she's saying. She says President Trump has a proven track record of discrimination against anybody who's really non-white in the United States predating his 2016 election in the White House. I don't know whether you've seen any photos of Trump with Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton and all these various black people, and the fact of his demographics on his hiring of thousands of people in his hotels and construction projects. He's hiring all kinds of women as executives. This lady is just shooting smoke, blowing smoke. I don't know. But anyway, I think it's fascinating that she's paying penalties for not taking care of her people while claiming that that's her mission in life, is taking care of the poor and the troubled of the United States of America. So, anyhow, hey, I want to also thank, we're coming up to a break here, but I don't know that we'll take a break. We're having trouble out here actually today. And this system, this equipment is, I'm chewing gum as fast as I can so I can glue it all together. We're having trouble. Oh, we got music. You got music? Is that music? It didn't come on, though. Is it going to come on? You playing it? We want to take a break now, or are we going to wait a minute? What?
Let's take a break.
Okay, we're going to take a break. We're going to see if this commercial will work. All right. Well, I want to, before we get on the final moments today, I want to again thank Dave Greenitz Construction. We heard a commercial for him here earlier. For his ongoing support over these many years for trauma, for our show, and also the plumbing doctor, Ted Holmes Plumbing Doctor. I use those guys personally. I used them before I was on the radio, and they've saved me a lot of money. In fact, when I used the plumbing doctor one day, they were over there fixing something, and they said, Lou, because Marysville, has the highest water rates by far, 300% higher than Yuba City, Linden, Olivehurst. And so one day the plumbing doctor guys were over, and they were repairing something. And they said, hey, Lou, these toilets you got are ancient, and we could put in some low-flow, brand-new toilets here and save you a lot of water usage. And I thought, oh, yeah, that's easy. Why don't you just do that? Because Marysville, the Cal Water that controls all the water usage in Marysville, is totally ripping us off. It's like when you talk about corporate ripoffs, that would be Cal Water Service. So just in the changing out of 2 toilets saved me thousands of gallons of water a year, because those old toilets were flushing about 3 times as much as the new toilets, which saved me lots of money. Because in Marysville, water is like liquid gold. Even though Cal Water Service gets the water for free, they do not pay the city of Marysville anything for it. and all they do is bring it to the house and make sure it's of the right quality and bill us for it somehow. And every water system in the state is regulated that they have to measure up to certain quality standards. So don't tell me that Marysville water is somehow the fountain of youth. So, but anyway, it was the plumbing doctor that changed out my toilets and helped me save a lot of money on that rip-off Cal Water service. So thank you, Ted Holmes and the plumbing doctor, and their number is 6719111. They look like an ambulance. In fact, some of my friends that kind of check on me every once in a while, see if I'm still breathing, they saw the ambulance, they saw the plumbing doctor rig sitting out front, looked like an ambulance, and they called me to make sure I was all right. They didn't see the plumbing doctor written on the side. They thought it was, Bi-County ambulance sitting out there checking my heart or something. Anyway, also Greenwich Construction is if you want the elite in terms of quality and professionalism on getting your house done, they are amazing. They show up and they finish the job on time. They show up. You make an appointment. Dave shows up, or their workers show up. They do a great job, clean up after themselves. There's no big surprises. And if you want to see some of their work, you don't even have to call them. You can just go on their website at Greenetz Construction, Greenetz, greenetzconstruction.com, and check out those kitchens and baths. And they also do a lot of this stuff. They do some amazing deck work, and they even, if you want to like redo the entry, put a new front door on your house, and they got it together, and they're on it. I've had them redo my kitchen, and I just leave for a couple of weeks, go to China or Vietnam, do a project over there, come home, it's all done. Pretty cool. So anyway, if you want to support people that got their head on straight and believe the right stuff, they're patriots, and they're supporting a lot of good causes in the community and around the world. They've helped me overseas before and working in Vietnam and elsewhere. In fact, Ted Holmes has traveled all over the world building stuff to help the poor. And so anyway, that's that. Thank you guys for all your help. I saw this. I thought it was good, and so I'm going to read it to you. It says, I'm a citizen of the USA. Here's all I want. I feel like this is what I feel like. I'm a citizen of the USA. Here's all I want. Borders closed. Language, English. Culture, Constitution, the Bill of Rights. Drug-free, mandatory drug screening before welfare. No freebies to non-citizens. Also, balanced budget, tax reform, and term limits for Congress and senators. I was listening to Michael Savage the other day, and he was talking about the slogan on the Statue of Liberty that was, the Statue of Liberty was built by the French and gifted to the United States. And there's a slogan on there, and he reminded everyone, which I think is a good reminder, that slogan, like y'all come, y'all are welcome here, that was prior to any freebies. No health insurance, no health medical care, no free food, no housing subsidies, no welfare, no EBT cards. No. In other words, you just come here and carve out your own living. Go get yourself, if you're bringing a trade, like you sew clothing, you're a tailor, you're a carpenter, you're a cook, whatever you are, just come on and get it on and see if you can make it here in America, and we welcome you. But if you cannot, that would be up to you and your family. In other words, if you had relatives that were already here. If they get tired of supporting you because you can't make enough money, then you go back to Germany, go back to England, go back to wherever you came from, Russia. It's up to you. You can live there, you can live here, whatever. If this works for you, have a happy, right? Freedom. That's what they call freedom. And so some people did go back. But that slogan does not, it applied to then when people were made of different stuff than they are today. They're not the type of, they weren't the type of people that said, "Oh, Mom, I'm bored. There's nothing to do around the North Valley here, Marysville and Yuba City. Can you pay for me to go to Six Flags or 25 Flags or Disneyland or the movies, or like, please, somebody else make my life happy." There wasn't any of that. You just came here and got it on. I like what Milton Friedman says, because I saw a little bit of it growing up. When I was a youngster and we were all interested in having a little money, some of my friends, more industrious than I was, they found out that I think maybe some of their relatives were delivering papers for the Appeal Democrat, which was a daily newspaper back in the day, the only newspaper at that time. And so they learned that they needed people to stuff the advertising section in the paper. At that time, it wasn't all mechanized. And so a bunch of youngsters, and they would hire them. And they were like 10, 12, 13 years old, right, young guys. And they would go down there because a lot of them had newspaper routes. But they'd go in there once a week, and they would stuff all those papers, and they'd pay them by the event of doing it, or some system. But it was a way for people could cash in, and they learned about it, and then other people would go there. Those jobs went by the way. You say, oh, well, it all just ended with mechanization. Well, mechanization was hurried along because the government, lobbied by the unions, said, we don't want kids to have those jobs. We want those jobs. And they need to be full-time jobs with benefits. So then newspapers and other types of businesses that made jobs for young people, like my father had a meat market, and he always hired a young man, at that time he was always a young guy, to clean up. In other words, they'd clean out the meat cases, put them in the refrigeration, different refrigeration, sanitize the entire meat cases, clean up, in other words, get ready for the next day. They do that every single night and put things away tidily and keep all the floors clean, wipe all the glass down. And there was a process. I was involved in it, but other people were hired to do it as well. Today, that doesn't pay to hire people like that because the unions have come in and eliminated those jobs because they wanted to force people out. That's why when it's confusing, I think, for a lot of people to listen to Milton Friedman and say, when he mentioned apartheid, when the unions insisted on equal pay for everybody, that eliminated the advantage that black people had to do the same job for cheaper. It eliminated their leverage. So when the unions argued for equal pay, whether it's gender or ethnic group, that forced potential employers to only hire union guys because they were more skilled. Maybe they had skills or they could get it done faster, or they didn't want to hire a black person, right? They were racist. So what Friedman was saying is with apartheid, before equal pay for equal ethnic group, the blacks had an advantage that they could offer by saying, I'll do that cheaper. I'll do that job cheaper. And it gave them a leverage to get work. But the unions eliminated that by saying equal pay for the same work. The same thing happened in New York. And what happened, I think you can read about it and you can Google it, the Davis-Bacon Act. It's named after the two guys, Davis and Bacon, who promoted a racist bill. And what happened is as we got further and further away from slavery in the 1920s, blacks were becoming very skilled. Maybe they weren't, in some cases, as skilled or as fast as white construction companies up on the East Coast or along the coast. But blacks were becoming more and more skilled at construction, and so they began competing and bidding on the same jobs that whites were. And so they were beating them out. And so when there was a hospital, I think it was a government hospital, a federal hospital or state hospital, I can't remember the city, but they underbid, and it stirred up the whites so much that they got Davis and Bacon to pass the Davis-Bacon Act, which is a racist act, to do the same thing that South Africans did with apartheid. They said that on any government job that the government would mandate a certain wage had to be paid. That took the leverage then that the blacks had of offering to do it for less. It eliminated that. So then the employer said, well, let's just hire the white boys instead of the black boys, right? That's how that worked. And it was a racist. And today, like recently, we just voted against the school bond in Marysville. One of the reasons I always vote against it, it's a total ripoff. I could build those schools by myself, hiring a contractor, for about a third less than they're building them because I wouldn't follow the Davis-Bacon Act. That Davis-Bacon Act from the 1920s or 30s is now controlling all government projects and adding 20 to 30% higher labor costs. Who pays that? The taxpayers pay it. It's a union-controlled, it's socialism. It's saying the government is going to tell you what insurances you have, the retirement you have, the wages you pay, so you can't get the best, you can't get a lower bid because it's controlled by government. And so the unions then, they don't want to compete with the private sector. They say, well, we'll compete, but only if everybody has to pay our wages. That's not competing, is it? So Davis-Bacon legislated racism, and that's still what we live with today. Now, the second thing is the reason you always want to vote against school bonds is the cost of the bonds. That school bond, which was, I think, what, 70-some million dollars, that would have cost $140 million to repay. Would you do that? Would you borrow if you want a $10,000 car and you don't have the $10,000 and you said I'll borrow the money? Would you pay $20,000? Would you pay $20,000 for a $10,000 car? Some people would. They're stupid. They never get ahead in life. They're always behind the eight ball. But that's why school bonds are such a ripoff. For one, they cost a fortune to pay back. Number two is that you're paying 20 to 30% higher for your labor rates because the unions are getting an edge by the government saying you've got to pay that person's wages at that rate. It's a total ripoff. So we need reform, and if we had reform and we could bid as low as we wanted on these school jobs and still have to come up with the same standards of construction, we would have a lot nicer schools for a lot less money. And but the fact is our money just doesn't go far. Like, for instance, if the pay for a Davis-Bacon Act job, a government job, is like $28 an hour plus benefits, would you hire somebody to come in or maybe it's $32 an hour. I don't know what it is anymore. I've been out of the system for a long time. Would you hire somebody to come over and fix your screen door for that kind of money? You wouldn't do it, would you? Because you're looking for the best price to get a nice job done for you. But when we go to a government job, like, for instance, that bridge is being built between Marysville and Yuba City, that's costing us 20, 30% extra for labor because it's a prevailing wage Davis-Bacon job. That's just the way that is. So we're paying a lot more than we need to. We could We could build the bridge. If we went out to straight competition, we could build the bridge and remodel the entire Riverfront Park, have the nicest soccer facility in the whole California. But we waste it all and on ways that we really didn't have to spend the money. Okay, I wanted to tell you one other thing. You know, you don't hear quite as much about global warming, but the fact is that it's mainstream. Do you know that global warming or climate change is now in all your textbooks? They're scaring the hell out of the children, thinking that when they throw something in the garbage or drive down the highway, they're killing a bear or something like that. But over and over, every news item after news item is disproving the fact that somehow, you know, nobody's arguing that the climate doesn't change, right? We have 4 seasons of the year in most parts of the country. So the climate changes quite a bit throughout each year, but it just goes through a repetitive cycle. According to the Bible, actually told us it would work out that way. But even if you don't bother with the Bible, you never read it before, you notice that it gets cold and then it changes, right? So the idea was that Al Gore and a number of fraudulent scientists propagated was that somehow that mankind, who if you take off in an airplane, it just takes a few minutes and you can't even see them anymore. They're so tiny. Mankind is somehow affecting the entire universe around the United States, or around the Earth. So I get a kick out of these things like instead of the global ice cap melting, it's actually thicker than ever. And it was supposed to completely melt years ago, according to The Inconvenient Truth, the movie by Al Gore. But the other day I noticed this headline, no Oklahoma tornado deaths in 2018. So you might think, well, so what's that mean? I don't even keep track of tornado deaths because we don't have tornadoes pretty much in California, right? It's really a freak thing. But no, Oklahoma, it's a big tornado area, right? No tornado deaths in 2018. That's the first time since 2006. You would think if you followed Inconvenient Truth that the number of tornado deaths would be going up, right? So the National Weather Service says no one was killed in a tornado in 2018. The first time since 2006. Oklahoma reports that just 41 tornadoes, 41, you think, oh, that's a lot of tornadoes. Well, it all depends on how you look at it. 41 tornadoes were recorded in the state in 2018, down from the state's average of 56. Well, that's 56 is the average. So that's 15 less, right? So Rick Smith, who's the warning coordination meteorologist, says in Norman, Oklahoma, says the state's relatively light tornado season likely played a major role in the lack of tornado deaths. Well, I could have told him that, and I'm not any meteorologist. So it's interesting. We have these floods out here, and we have fires. Like recently, I think the fire at Camp Fire, would they have 58 deaths up there, or was it 80-something? 80-something?
I think it was in the 80s, wasn't
80s, is it 87? I was looking at the photos of all the people the other day and the ages. It was pretty sobering to look at it. But anyway, tornadoes kill a lot of people. A May 20th tornado struck Moore, the city of Moore, killed 25 people, and a May 31 tornado and flash flooding struck El Reno, Oklahoma, killed 23 people. So these tornadoes are gnarly. So anyway, it's interesting. Whether you look at hurricanes, Class 3 hurricanes like Katrina, or tornadoes, they're not growing in number. They're actually shrinking in number. So but they're not going to. The thing with the liberals is that they've already determined the agenda and they have it into the mainstream of education now. So it doesn't matter what the facts are out there. They're going to continue to promote it. So anyway, let's see. I think that's about it for today. I just want to mention again, I I noticed on the Elite Universal Security website yesterday that they are looking for employees, workers, all up and down the valley, these guys. It's busy out there. You notice that? There's just construction going on everywhere. There's businesses being built. People, new franchises moving in or outlets moving in all over the 2 counties. And Elite Universal Security wants to hire people all the way Butte County, all the way up into Redding, Yuba and Sutter County. So honestly, to me right now, there's no excuse for people to be out of work. No excuse at all. There's lots of jobs. And I just want to close with a comment of just in memory of Ronell Singh and another wonderful officer, Natalie Corona, down in the city of Davis. I think it's the first law enforcement death they've had in 60 years or 80 years. It was amazing. She's only on the force for a couple of weeks. Actually, she was on the force but hadn't been on her own patrol. And a guy just came out and shot her. She was just checking on an accident, a 3-car accident, and a guy just came along, and she wasn't in a scrap with him. He just shot her. And I saw her father making comments on YouTube, but I couldn't even turn on the volume. It was hurting my heart watching this dad, former police officer, talk about his beautiful daughter. So I don't know, folks. It's the first shooting in 60 years. Not had an officer shooting in 60 years. Amazing. So we're just going to sign off in memory of Natalie and Ronell. And I don't know what we're going to do about it, but we need to make a change. So stay tuned for some sports. Catch you later.